Um, what we are interested in is work towards planar scalable integrated circuits for the future. So for information processing, I mean both classical and quantum computing and communication. So what we look at is a combination of semiconductor quantum dots, plasmonic crystals, photonic crystals, and dielectric structures. Okay. So I'll present some of our recent results on these topics. What we have at TIFR is a ultrafast spectroscopy lab. We have tunable light sources, laser sources, and CW sources. We have low temperature facilities with and without magnetic fields. We have detectors for single photon detection levels to PMTs and the regular CCD devices and other things. We have mostly work on time resolved techniques like the standard pump probe, time resolved PL, time resolved transmission, and nonlinear photoluminescence kind of experiments. And also like we have spatially and temporally resolved setups for spectroscopy. And we also look at like Hanbury-Brown twist kind of measurements using silicon and in-gas APDs. Okay. So we have a class 1000 clean room as a department facility. We have all the required things like electron beam and photolithography facilities with deposition based on CVD, the sputtering and thermal and E-beam evaporation, atomic layer deposition, and characterization tools which are required to make nanofabrications. What we use this is for studying what I mentioned, like plasmonic and in general metal dielectric structures. So just to summarize some of our recent results on single quantum dots, Professor Ray has mentioned in the morning that quantum dots are very useful for electronic light emitting applications and light detection systems. So one of the questions is like, can we get efficient green emitters? One candidate for this is manganese doped cadmium sulfide nanoparticles or quantum dots. But the issue here from basic physics point of view is that like different groups have reported different center peak positions for this luminescence peak. Okay. The question was like what is causing this wide shift in reported values of the central peak. So what we found is that like, so basically the position of the manganese atom inside the quantum dot is very important. For example, the manganese atom can be at the center, off center, or on the surface of the quantum dot, which results in different species. So 3 different species contributing to different levels and evolving into a ensemble peak. So what we shown is that like by resolving these single dot spectra, which matched well with the theoretical spectra, we showed that like the position of the manganese atom is very important in deciding like what is the center of the ensemble photoluminescence peak. Okay. So as Ms. Ray has pointed out, like so one of the recent interest in quantum dots is to show it as a 2-level system. Okay. If you see like last 10 years, like there is considerable amount of work starting with discrete optical spectrum to entanglement generation, anti-bunching, or the single photon emissions, the driven Rabi oscillations, dress states. All these things, all these reports are mainly focused on establishing or demonstrating the atom-like properties of quantum dots, just to use these quantum dots as solid-state equivalent of atoms in all solid-state devices. But one crucial difference between a quantum dot and an atom is a quantum dot interacts with its surroundings, okay, which leads to decoherence. Okay. Now the question of decoherence in single quantum dots is 2 different mechanisms. 2 dominant sources have been reported in the literature. One is the so-called wetting layer model, where the electron and hole are physically separate. The electron is in the quantum dot and hole is in the wetting layer. So this delocalized interaction leads to decoherence. This has been shown both theoretically and experimentally. However, the other model, which to us looked more basic mechanism, which is the acoustic phonon mediated mechanism, though it has several theoretical works, proposals, it has not been experimentally shown before our work. So what we tried to show is like acoustic phonon mediated excitation induced dephasing in single quantum dots. Okay. So the model basically is straightforward, like a coupled dot phonon model of excitation-induced dephasing. So where the basic final result is that like you have this K2 term, which is the gamma to the dephasing rate is proportional to K2 times omega square. Omega square is the Rabi frequency, square of the Rabi frequency. This K2, if you look at it, like it's linearly proportional to this temperature. It's directly proportional to the temperature with some coefficient A, which depends on the bulk material properties and not on the single on the dot properties. Okay. So what we did is like to show this, like we picked up a sample which is low density quantum dots, in which like, so we have chosen the dots such that like the dot resonance is far away from the wetting layer peak. So there is no contribution of the wetting layer in this case. We made these 400 micron by 200 micron mesas and then semi-transparent titanium top contacts, and then like we did photocurrent measurements. What we studied is basically the Rabi oscillations in the photocurrent. So this is the typical setup to reduce bi-exciton and multi-exciton excitation. So we used a basically a 4F0 zero dispersion compensating pulse shaper. So that reduces a spectral width, and then like we also use circularly polarized light to reduce the or to eliminate the multiphoton excitation, especially the bi-exciton resonances. Okay. So then, as a function of temperature, we studied the Rabi oscillations in the photocurrent, and then by fitting this to the known theory, like so, we plotted the K2 as a function of temperature, which showed a linear dependence. Okay. So this established for the first time that like the dominant or mechanism for excitation-induced dephasing in single quantum dots is acoustic phonon mediation. Okay. The other work which we are recently doing is on quantum dot spins are interesting because of their long lifetimes. For high fidelity devices, like the quantum dot spins are more promising as qubits than the excitons. So, but the question is like how to estimate the spin state of the system without destroying the system. Okay. So what we are looking at is spin photon interface. For example, if we have a quantum dot as a source, like can we estimate the spin state by looking at the emission? Okay. For planar structures, the problem is the coupling of different polarization components into the waveguides. Okay. So what we designed is photonic crystal structures where for example, in this case, the TE component travels along the Z direction, which is horizontal, and then the TM component preferentially goes in the vertical direction. By studying these two, like we can back calculate the spin state of the quantum dot. That's the idea. So as a proof of principle, we did some studies, experimental studies, where we have a quantum dot at the center of the structure with 4 waveguides in 4 directions. We can label them like top, right, left, and bottom. And then these are the output couplers which are there. Now, when we apply a magnetic field about 3 to 4 Tesla, so we have the Zeeman splitting resulting in the sigma plus or sigma minus circularly polarized light emission. Okay. What we show here is that like the main result in this is so basically the position of the dot here matters. Okay, when it is exactly at the center. Okay, so then it's a symmetric system, so the light can couple to all the 4 waveguides equally. But by doing interference measurements, we can estimate the phase as well as the state of the polarization of the light. Okay, so from that, like we can back calculate the spin state of the quantum dot. But the interesting point is that like when the dot is off-centered, so the symmetry is broken, and the different polarizations preferentially couple to different waveguides. We can directly measure the output of these output from these waveguides, and we can study the spin state. You can estimate the spin state of this. That has what has been shown in this. Okay, so it's sort of like these are finite difference time domain simulations which show that like when the source position is up to say 20-30 nanometer from the center, so it's difficult to distinguish the output from all the 4 waveguides because of the symmetry. But the symmetry is broken when we move the source away from the center. For example, when it's about say 60 nanometer or so, there is preferential coupling of different polarization states to the different waveguides. So we can easily estimate the spin state of the quantum dot using this. Okay. So our other work focuses on plasmonics. Plasmonics, as we know, is well known for many centuries, especially for decorative applications like this Lycurgus cup, like which shows that like the reflected and the transmitted light are different. So when we shine light to study, to look at the reflected light, the cup looks green, and when we put light inside the cup, like it looks red in color. That's because the ruby glass has a mixture of silver and gold nanoparticles of different sizes. Okay, so which gives these unique colors to the this cup. Okay, and also like we know of these stained glass windows which are everywhere. So these get their unique colors because of the properties of these metal nanoparticles. For example, gold nanoparticles of different sizes show different transmission colors. So the reason for this is that like when an oscillating electric field is incident on a, for example, a nanoparticle, so the surface charge carriers, they oscillate in tandem, like with respect to the incident light. So when, for example, in the positive half cycle, the electrons are pushed to the lower half, and then like in the negative half cycle they move up, the charge goes on onto the top of the nanoparticle. So this causes these oscillations. The resonance frequency for a given nanoparticle is the plasmon resonance. Okay. So depending on the size and shape of the nanoparticle, you have different resonances and thus different colors to the nanoparticles. Okay. So another interesting aspect, not in terms of from the point of view of particles, but in terms of interfaces, you can have like dielectric metal interface. The metals have free electrons, but under certain conditions we can excite this charge density wave at the metal dielectric interface, okay, which has this surface wave nature, in the sense that like away from the interface, like you have exponentially decreasing field profiles. Okay. So this charge density wave, or the surface plasmon polar return wave, has dispersion relation given by this, which in comparison with the photon dispersion shows that like there is a momentum mismatch between light and the plasmon mode at the interface. So this shows that like for a given frequency of light, it's difficult to excite a plasmon mode at the interface. So now the question is like, how do we overcome this problem and excite the plasmons using light? Okay. There are three different techniques which are used generally in the literature. One most used is the prism geometry, where above the critical angle, like so basically total internal reflection, there is a small component which passes across this interface, which excites the plasmon mode. Okay. And the other one is the grating geometry. So here again, one of the grating orders is made to go along the angle is chosen such that like one of the grating modes excites the plasmon mode or the surface mode. Okay. In these two geometries, like the main problem is that like there is an angle dependence. Okay. So it's basically like the angle defines the plasmon mode excited. Okay. So in the waveguide geometry, basically we excite a waveguide mode which travels along this waveguide, and a small part of this traveling waveguide mode like excites the surface plasmon mode or the surface mode at this interface. Okay. Here there is no angle dependence, which is a problem in these two cases. Now our question was that like, is there any way we can overcome this angle dependence in case of gratings, periodic structures? What we showed is that like indeed it's possible if we have 2D structures like this. This can be, I mean, you can have many different variations of this, but the results will be unique. This is what we have chosen is unpatterned gold dielectric interface with a dielectric pattern on top, because this is least studied in the literature. Okay, what we show is that like there is a flat angle independent excitation, the plasmon mode, which we can excite. So this is shown from minus 25 to plus 25 degrees, but you can go further down. Okay. So the other interesting result from this is that like so clearly the FTTD simulations show that like we have a localized field at the gold dielectric interface because of these grooves which are making in the pattern. Okay, so this is a periodic structure which has been simulated, okay, which shows that like the field maxima are there at the interface, showing the plasmon excitation. Okay, so another interesting feature for which possibly could be used for quantum information is the anti-crossings. The exciton anti-crossings are very well known. and well studied. So what we show here is that like the in-plane plasmon modes which are excited by the 2D pattern on the top leads to anti-crossings and splittings in the dispersion profile. What is well known is that like the plasmon modes which are excited at the top and the bottom interface, they interact with each other and leading to coupled plasmon modes. But what we are showing here is that like the in-plane plasmon modes can interact with each other and lead to anti-crossings which are shown here. Okay. So to remove polarization and angle independence in general, like we are looking at plasmonic quasi-crystals. So these are patterns made in gold. So what we show is that like a simple way of designing and making these plasmonic crystals. So and then like so for example, we made 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter square quasi-crystal structures which have about 6 million points. So the idea is that like we first start with a lattice which has a rhombus as the lattice cell, unit lattice, and then like we turn it around by, for example, if we want to make pi by 5 symmetry structures, we rotate it by 32 degrees and then superimpose on this first structure. Then we make like another 32 degrees, another, so there are 4 such rotations and then superpositions which lead to this pi by 5 symmetry structure. But to make this using electron beam lithography, you need to remove the points which are multiple exposed. So we use some sort algorithms to pick out these multiple exposing points, and then like we make sure that like there is only single exposure per point. Okay, we made these structures, and once we have this structure in space, like we can do the FFT to get the K-space structure and then compare it with the diffraction which we measure, okay, which shows like pretty good match. And we also use this information to calculate the plasmon modes which are theoretically possible for this structure. Okay. So what we have shown in this is that like, so there is up to an order of magnitude enhancement in broadband enhancement in transmission from these structures, and it's completely polarization and angle independent. Okay. In addition, we have seen some nonlinear properties like second harmonic generation, and we're trying to understand like what's the origin of this here. Okay. So we also looked at from light source point of view, green or visible to visible light source point of view, like we looked at zinc oxide, zinc sulfide core shell nanostructures, which when we place on top of these nanopatterned structures, we showed that like, so there is an enhancement of almost 2.5 times in the broadband emission. Okay. And also like it showed a linear behavior unlike the dots which showed a saturation behavior when they are placed on top of unpatterned quants. Okay. So the other field which we are looking at is magnetoplasmons. So the magneto-optics is interesting, but the applications are very few because the magneto-optic effects, both the Kerr and the Faraday effects, are very weak. Okay. So what we're looking at is like how to enhance these magneto-optical effects, and one way is to make use of this plasmon mediation. So what I have shown is that like the plasmon dispersion is given by this expression given here at the metal dielectric interface, but when we introduce a magnetic field, there is this additional component which comes in which depends on the applied magnetic field. Okay. So the plasmon modes at the metal dielectric interface are modified by the applied magnetic field, and these modified plasmons are called the magnetoplasmons. So basically these off-diagonal components in the dielectric tensor are getting modified by the applied magnetic field. Okay. So what we showed is that like, so basically we can couple these plasmon modes to the absorption spectrum in the magnetic thin films, for example, bismuth, doped yttrium, iron, garnets, and by careful designing and fabrication, like we showed that like the calculated and the measured dispersion for the plasmons match pretty well, and then like we measured the transverse magneto-optical Kerr effect for the first time in transmission geometry. By conventional wisdom is that like the Kerr effect is always in the reflection geometry and the Faraday effect is in the transmission geometry. But we showed that like the Kerr effect can also be measured in the transmission geometry. So what we make use of is the enhanced transmission because of the plasmon excitation, okay, and which is a surface effect, which couples to the Kerr effect, which is also a surface effect. Okay, and then we show that there is a transmission. In transmission, we can measure this magneto-optical Kerr effect. Okay, so the black curve is the measured transmission spectrum. What is interesting is that like the dips correspond to plasmon absorption of the incident white light field. Okay, so but these spectra, these dips are like pretty broad. So it's very difficult to identify where the exact plasmon resonance is. But when we look at the Kerr signal for normal incidence, so what's happening is that like so there is a right and left circularly propagating components which form the standing wave and cancel each other. So for theta equal to 0 degree, the green curve, so there is no Kerr signal. But on the other hand, if you go to a small non-zero angle like 0.8 degrees, you see a strong enhancement in the Kerr signal. You see the positive peak and the negative dip. These two correspond to the two counter-propagating waves, and basically they show the exact position of the Kerr signal. So in addition to the enhancement, which is 3 orders of magnitude compared to the unpatterned structures, so we show that like there is a 3 orders of magnitude enhancement in the Kerr signal. In addition, this can be used as a precise tool to identify the plasmon resonance in these structures. So the more recent work is on surface plasmon modulation by acoustic phonons. So the idea is that like so we have these periodic structures on the top, gold gratings on the top, which will help in coupling light to the plasmon modes. So the plasmon modes are excited at this interface. Now can we modulate these plasmon modes by external means? So one way is that like we put this transducer at the bottom, and then like by incident light pulse, like we can generate acoustic phonons in the medium. So these acoustic phonons, which are propagating in the direction opposite to the incident light, like so that modulates the incoming light. Okay, so you can look at these transmissions, and then like we see that like up to these lines are basically calculated acoustic phonon resonances which are expected for these structures. Okay, we show that like up to 110 gigahertz frequencies, like we can excite these plasmon modes depending on the intensity of the strength of the acoustic mode which is excited. Okay. So the other work which we are excited about is a second order effect, which is again a magneto-optic effect, which is not the traditional Kerr or Faraday effect. For example, like when the applied magnetic field is 0, the domains are all randomly oriented. You have a TM mode, which is pure TM mode. That's the well-defined Ez, Ex, and Hy components. But when you apply an applied magnetic field, the domains are all oriented with respect to the magnetic field, and the modes split into quasi TM and quasi TE modes. So the result is that like so you have these TE like modes which are available in the TM, and the TM like fields which are available in the TE mode resonances. So if we design our structure so that like we have both TM and TE modes possible, so then there is possibility of coupling TM to TE mode or TE to TM mode. So what we show here is basically this delta function delta, which is defined here. So there is a S-polarized light component which is enhancing in the transmission in the far field. Okay, when there is a TM to TM and TE modes are resonant, so there is an enhancement in the transmission for the TE component in the far field. So we also look at novel plasmonic structures. For example, these are incoming and outcoupling gratings, and then in between, like we have this graded grating structure, which is designed such that, like from one period to other period, the grooving, the period is kept constant, but one period to other period, the groove width is changed by a precise 10 nanometer width. Okay, so the idea is to look at plasmon dynamics using these kind of structures. Okay, so for For example, for block oscillations, studying block oscillations, you need this periodic structure with a linear gradient. So the gradient which you are creating, the linear gradient which you are creating is the gradient in the groove width. Okay. So you also look at the subwavelength Fabry-Perot structures. So what is known is that like you have an interface here, gold air or gold some other dielectric interface here, and a gold dielectric interface here. So you can have oscillations, the Fabry-Perot oscillations at these two interfaces because you have two reflections here. But what we are showing here is that like we can have reflections at the subwavelength grooves, okay, and can have field maxima inside the grooves. Okay. So here, like for example, the resonance is at 532 nanometer, but the width, the separation between these two gold rods is about like 50 nanometer. Okay. So this could have applications in, for example, in trapping different nanoparticles and biological molecules. Okay. We also looked at these taper waveguides. These are with the silicon core with gold on either side, and then silicon dioxide cladding. So these are taper waveguides. We studied different geometries and showed that like when we have gold and exponentially decreasing tapers, like we have efficiency, pretty good efficiency of coupling to near field. Okay. So the other work which we do is related to dielectric heterolayers. So these are design refractive index profiles. What we are interested in is broadband omnidirectional reflection less potentials. So what we show is that like as a function of thickness, like if we can modulate the refractive index, we can suppress the reflections over broad wavelength range. So this has been proposed by Kay and Moses long ago, and Dattagupta and Agarwal, they have shown that like it can be used for anti-reflection potentials at optical wavelengths. So we have designed and fabricated these heterolayer structures which conform to reflectionless potential, and showed that like we do have very small, like less than 1% reflection over broad, like 500 to 2500 nanometer wavelengths, and for normal incidence up to 50 degrees which we could measure. So it's a flat, like I mean very low reflection and very high transmission in these layers. So as an offshoot of that problem was that like we have visible absorbing TiO2 films. So TiO2 is well studied with lot of photovoltaic applications. So in 2011, like so there is one report which showed that like under extreme conditions, like you can have TiO2 nanoparticles made at extreme high pressure and excess hydrogen conditions, like you can get these dark or black TiO2 unlike the traditional TiO2 which is white in color. Okay. What we found is that like we can make these dark TiO2 films or the black TiO2 films which are visible absorbing. As can be seen here, almost like 40% absorption in the visible range covering 500 to 1000 nanometer, and but these are physically deposited using sputtering and atomic layer deposition. So it did lots of studies to understand what's happening. So finally the TEM study showed that like we have TiO2 nanoparticles here. Okay. So all the XPS and other things showed that like there is a slight shift. XRD shows that like these are clean rutile TiO2 particles. Okay. Just to summarize, like it's very fast, like but just to summarize, we are working towards scalable planar networks. So we are looking at like quantum dots, photonic and plasmonic crystals, and the combination of these structures which we are studying. So these are the people who are involved in this work. So the magnetoplasmonic work is done in collaboration with Vladimir at Moscow State and Ilya Ekimov at Dortmund. And the quantum dot, single quantum dot work is done in collaboration with Maurice Kolnick's group at Sheffield, with Ruth Alton from Bristol and Andrew from Hitachi Cambridge. And the dielectric heterolayers work is being done in collaboration with Dattagupta. Okay. So these are the people in our group at TAFR. These are the funding agencies. Almost all the funding comes from TAFR. The travel grants come from Department of Science and Technology and the Russian Foundation for Basic Research. and the UK IERA, Swedish Research Links, and the NICT from Japan. Okay. Thank you.
Any questions?
When you use that metal dielectric interface with the dielectric on the top, so do you have the whole switch goes up to the metal or just the part?
We can make up to going up to the metal, but what we use is we do not go up to the metal. Deliberately we don't go. Okay, we make the modulation only at the top. These are called the shallow gratings.
Okay. So ultimately you get the refractory index variations, there are the patterns because of the ER dielectric. I mean,
yes. So the idea is this. So it's basically like we want an unpatterned interface here. We can make these holes come till here, but in which case, like you have metal layer here, okay, and the metal dielectric.
So it will be angle dependent again.
Yes. So it will be. I mean, the resonances will shift a little bit because the interface is different now, but we can make those things. We have actually studied those things as well. But here the interest is that like this is completely unpatterned. So the pattern is only here, which modulates the incoming light. The way to understand is like you have the plane wave incident, the reflected component modulates the incoming light, and so like you have specific components which couple into the surface mode.
And the second question, this TiO2 you said is a nanoparticle. So is it some different phase or?
No, that's like TEM showed that like they're completely rutile. XRD shows it's completely rutile.
Okay.
Okay. The XPS shows that like the binding energy is shifted by about 0.5 eV, 0.5 MeV, 0.5 eV, say 500 MeV.
So the band gap, did you try to find out the band gap also? I mean,
no, because it's pretty difficult. So we are looking at conduction, modulating the conduction. Now with doping, like we can reduce from 150 mega ohm centimeter to about like 80 ohm centimeter.
okay, thank you.